Welcome to the VO School podcast, dedicated to the art, craft and business of voiceover. Each week builds upon the last to give you a comprehensive understanding of a career in VO. My name's Jamie Muffett. I'm a full-time voice talent and audio engineer, and I'll be joined by some of the industry's top professionals on both sides of the microphone to drill down and dig up the truth. Hello. Welcome to episode 11 of the VO School podcast. Today we're talking about marketing and branding, and I have two really superb guests on today, Celia Siegel and Doug Melville, and they're two extremely experienced and well-respected marketing professionals. Before we get to it, if you want to connect with us on Facebook, which you should because the community is growing quite rapidly. We've only been going a few weeks and we've got, I think, over 300 people, or around about 300 people right now on the Facebook group. The address is facebook.com/groups/VO School Podcast. And you can also connect with us on Twitter at VO School Pro. And a little side plug for another podcast that I produce for Backstage called In the Envelope. And it's a podcast ostensibly about awards shows, but really it's actually at its heart about acting. And honestly, it's been really career-changing for me. Mercifully, I don't present this show, so you can breathe a sigh of relief about that. Interview guests include people like Julia Louis-Dreyfus, Bob Odenkirk, Catherine Hahn, Tandy Newton, Bryan Cranston, Elizabeth Moss, Claire Danes, many more. So definitely give that a listen to. It's on iTunes and SoundCloud, and Backstage posts about it. And thank you to Chris Sharps, who has been managing the Facebook group. I wanted to get a quick thank you in there before we begin this episode, because he's doing a fantastic job and deserves some thanks for it. So send him a message, give him an high five, or send him some abuse. I think that's all fine. Before we get to the interview, one slight caveat. I don't know where Celia was when she was recording this interview, but she brings a bit of her own foley to this. There's some sound effects in the background of cafe environmental sounds and some footsteps and stuff, so enjoy that. I'm going to try and RX as much of that out as possible. If you don't know what RX is, look forward to a future technology episode. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So sorry I've been babbling on for such a long time. Here are the bios, followed by the interview.
Style. Power.
You're watching the home of the NFL.
The all-new iPhone.
Reserve your Disney World season pass now.
Through all the runny noses, 3 a.m. coughs.
An all-new American Crime Story, tonight on FX.
Hi, it's J. Michael Collins, and these are just a few examples of the first-class demos my team and I are producing. If you'd like to have something similar, visit jmcvoiceover.com and click on the Demo Production tab to find out more.
Celia Siegel is the founder of Celia Siegel Management, widely recognized for building strong personal brands for voice talent. Before creating CSM, Celia was a respected talent agent with stints at CESD, JE, and Wehmann. A brand builder, certified life and business coach, success strategist, and talent manager, Celia has advanced the careers of top VO talent for more than 2 decades. In her first book, Voiceover Achiever, she shares her winning formula for creating standout brands that ignite standout careers. Doug Melville is Chief Diversity Officer for TBWA Worldwide, a top 10 ranked global advertising agency. Since joining the TBWA, he's led efforts that resulted in more than $150 million being spent with multicultural and women-owned businesses in the creative space. He's presented 3 TEDx talks on the topic and made multiple appearances on Fox Business. Doug was founder of e-commerce website redcarpets.com, and he worked alongside Irvin Magic Johnson as president of his agency and VP of his business development and marketing team. Here's my interview with Doug Melville and Celia Siegel. All right, great. So today I am joined by Celia Siegel and Doug Melville, and they are both marketing and branding experts. So welcome to you both.
Thanks for having us on.
Yes, thank you. We are here. We are live.
Yeah, live in the house. So today we're talking all about marketing 101. So I want to start by defining the terms marketing and branding. Now, these words are used almost interchangeably, but there's some differences between them. So, Celia, could you tell me the difference between what marketing and branding is?
Great. No, that's a great question. And people so frequently toss those in together. And branding is you and all about you. So that's the thing that you're going to be marketing. And then marketing is the activity of spreading your brand, spreading the word about you.
Right.
In kind of its simplest breakdown.
Yeah. And that's how you see it too, Doug?
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of the marketing, advertising, communications. I call it the MAC. It's kind of the aggregate of all of them. They've kind of all crossed in each other's swim lane in some sense. Digital kind of broke up the swim lane. So, but in a sense, it's about ensuring that you have values, your why, your underlying magic, and also you know how to reach your market and know your audience. So all that collectively is kind of in the marketing and branding ecosystem.
Right.
Totally.
So what comes first then? Presumably the branding has to come first. You take that and then go and market it. Is that how it works?
Yeah, definitely. That's a good place to start. And like Doug said, it does all mix together, in your business plan. But I always tell people that as far as your brand goes, I mean, it's really just expressing what's already there. So it's not about making something up or like creating some avatar of what you would like to be, but it's really about authentically telling your story as it stands. So that's a really great cornerstone to your whole voiceover career is what do you stand for? What portion of this business are you going to embody? What's yours? What's your work?
Right.
And I think that through thinking about your brand and creating a brand that feels really authentic, it's just a great place to run your career from.
Yeah, I think, if you kind of look at historically, we were kind of in, pre-07, when the iPhone and Android and kind of the mobile revolution came about, it was almost a fake it till you make it. Right. So people were figuring out ways to create personas or find likes or build an audience. But I think now that everything is kind of spread out and been democratized, it's more about authenticity.
Right.
So it's being open and honest with who you are, what you're bringing to the table. There's almost become two sides to every truth. So if someone can talk to you and they trust you and believe in you, I think that your word is actually starting to get more value and build up more capital than in the past, where it was about how many followers you had and did you have a contract and what was the arrangement. But I think now it's about that authentic, real self and knowing your qualities and traits, knowing your strengths and your weaknesses, knowing what you're good at and what you're great at, and also being coachable. There's a lot of different people are needed in order for one individual to be successful. And I think that we now realize the value of a team when building your own brand or your own marketplace, whether you're a small independent sole proprietor or a larger corporation.
Right, because sometimes you will need that team, that outside perspective to get a true sense on what you offer. Because self-reflection is all well and good, but, you're sort of tainted by your own opinion of yourself. And particularly because this is focused on the VO market, it's interesting because your business and your personhood are kind of quite intertwined. And your personality in some ways is your product. So it really takes a certain amount of, real self-analysis to get to that point where you know what you are, Is that true?
Definitely. It's sort of the intersection of who you are and being real about that, And I think it's right. It's the entirety of you. It's your shadow side. It's what you're good at. It's what you're bad at. Sometimes the thing that people want to buy from you is because of your weaknesses, if that makes any sense. So the really cool thing about voiceover and personal branding is that you are your product. So it's doubly important and just like an interesting space to play in.
It's very hard to separate the artist from the art. I think, ever since the beginning of time, art is a reflection of the artist and you're the sum of your experiences. So it's very hard, and particularly in voiceover, it's hard for anybody not to take things personal because your voice is so personal. Your voice is really what you have.
Right.
So it is very hard and very sensitive to communicate with artists about things that aren't related to their voice, but their brand or other elements of themselves, because they have to take it very personally because it's the most personal thing that they have.
And you mean voice figuratively or literally when it comes to voiceover?
Yeah. Well, yeah, both. It really is both. I mean, before everybody was recording podcasts and doing voiceovers, voices were something that were just kind of dissipated into the wind, but the people that were there heard it and you had to remember it. But now that your voice can be recorded and played for the eternity, every voice, art, word, sound, song, movie, video ever recorded in humankind is essentially online.
Right.
Yeah.
So, you can have in your pocket access to unlimited voices. So I think that the power of the voice is actually hitting its stride. It's galloping.
Yeah.
Especially because podcasts have allowed people to do two things at once. So you could listen and you can also do another activity. So
yes,
I think that people are now realizing that multitasking and the voice arts and being a voiceover artist is something that's a lot more attractive to new people and newcomers to the industry than it was in years past, at least what I'm seeing.
Yeah. Celia, have you seen that growth yourself?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've been doing this for 29 years, which is so crazy. But I started out as a talent agent, and then moved into management, so I've watched the industry evolve over the years. And it used to be just a handful of people in each city doing everything. And now it has exploded into this very accessible career. It's both accessible and ridiculously competitive,
Yes.
So it's this sort of paradox there. But absolutely, it's everywhere. And then when you look at, Siri and Alexa and podcasts and commercials and explainer videos, and it's just everywhere. So there's so much work, and it is just infiltrating our society. And I do think that it's bigger than ever.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Doug, I want to come back to something you said a little while ago, and you talked about having a team. Now, what team players are you talking about here? What roles are you talking about?
Well, I mean, in our perspective, so, I'm at an advertising agency and I'm a chief diversity officer. And one of my roles here is to work with our producers and our creative teams to widen the pool of who we use. So can we get some different voices in the room that we haven't used before, or maybe people that were on a figurative wait list? So I like to take the time to see how we can attract a larger range of voices. Now, with that, people have to stand out and they have to present themselves in the best light possible. And that's really where the team comes in. So I think in some sense, you can make a great website and you can do that either from a template or maybe your manager or agent or family friend, Wix or Squarespace, WordPress. You can kind of make a website. But I think what's most important is the team of networking. Attending events and networking is actually the most important thing because we're in a decentralized business. So that means each producer on each client in each office essentially is running their own production for the creation of media art, which is kind of how we communicate our commercial messages. They may be digital or radio and so forth. So you have to know and get out there. And I think attending events is the most important thing that people can do, because that handshake and getting out there. So the team starts even well before you've put together your day-to-day operational people. And it starts with you going out there and attending events. Also keeping a fresh blog, something very important. So even though that's a writing structure, it's important to see what you're doing and make notes so people can know what you're doing in this space, because we look at freshness. How often are you used? Are you relevant? Are you in the market? And then once you start doing that, then you have to work on your management team. You have to work on who represents you. So it's a little bit of a chicken and egg when you get started, like all industries, when you're the first generation in your family to do something. But I think really it starts with putting one foot in front of the other and attending events, keeping a blog, making case studies of all the work that you have, and then working to get a manager and an agent, and then getting out there and figuring out kind of where your career is going to sail.
Right, cool. And Celia, you have a team of people that work with you to help your clients. So what does your team look like?
So I have on my team, Marnie Lee is my copywriter. So all of the brands that you can see on my website, we conceptualize that, along with the talent. We have a brand finder, and then Marnie and I co-create all of the writing. And that would include the writing on your website, anything you're putting out there. I have a couple of virtual assistants just so I can kind of keep my plate clean and be creating brands and connecting with my clients. Martha Kahn does sales for me, so helping spread the word and sell my talent around to different buyers. And then I have a couple of online people who create e-cards and researchers who research my mailing list. So we really try to create a team for my clients where we're doing all of this marketing and branding for them, helping them with their agent relations, making sure everything's running really smoothly, because the talent need to wear so many hats.
Yeah.
That we like to take that off of their plate. So they're like, oh, I have a team.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, you get behind the microphone and audition beautifully, coach with great coaches, hone your skills. I would consider that a part of the team also is those coaches that we refer people to, because that is really the primary thing that a talent has to do is be awesome. So I just like to keep people in their zone of playfulness, recording jobs, reading auditions.
That's the dream really for a voice talent, is to be able to do the voicing and not have to worry about all that other stuff, because you guys are so good at that, and that's your area of expertise, and really it's much harder than I think people expect when they're going in. But Doug, you were going to say something to that?
Yeah, what I was going to say is I really think this conversation is valuable because Celia is essentially the seller and I'm essentially the buyer.
Right.
Totally.
Right.
So I think that conversations like this don't often happen. And when they do, they're not involved or engaged enough for people to really take things away. But when we look at talent, sometimes the talent is recommended to us, sometimes they're auditioned, sometimes the director has preferences or the producer. So there's many ways that the voice can be set on. And then if you want to use a celebrity voice or a well-known voice, it kind of goes on and on. But I essentially have some rules for businesses that I try to tell them. It's called digital breadcrumbs. And these are just simple tips that everybody can take and do. And I think, they're alphabetical. So the first was attend events, and the second was blog, and the third was create a case study. But then after that, it's setting Google alerts for auditions and your competition, so you could see what's showing up on the internet.
Right.
It's making an effective LinkedIn page, because LinkedIn just integrated with Microsoft. So now when you get ready to type an email on certain versions of O365 and Office, the individual's LinkedIn page shows up on the right side of the screen automatically. It's about making sure that your website is mobile friendly, because over half of all the people looking are on a mobile device, but sometimes the margins are weird. Sometimes people don't update the small 2016, 17, 18 copyright at the bottom. There's a lot of little nuances that people aren't doing, that if a professional who works on Madison Ave or in Hollywood looks at them, thinks that they're not put together or they're not detail oriented. Now, will that affect your audition? Is that a reflection of the work? It's all subjective, but buying a voice is like buying art. And you don't know what the buyer is looking at. So it's very important to work with companies like Celia to get your brand packaged and delivered in a way that it is Madison Ave and Hollywood ready. And then you have to do the work after that. But I think people just think it's a little, I'll just shoehorn this together and it won't be that big of a deal, or the website's not that important. But the reality of it is it's very, very important.
So I just love to dig in there a little bit into your process, because it's fascinating from my side of the sort of the table here. If you're in a meeting and you're running through some ideas of a campaign that you're, pushing to a client, and you're thinking about voices for a project, are you going online and researching things, or do you go, I want this John Krasinski style voice, and then you just hand it off to an intern to find a person, or you're really getting involved,
It really depends. But if we have a voice that we want, or if there's a stanza of a poem and we want to get the original author's voice, or is that author alive or passed? Is someone currently in the marketplace that epitomizes that voice? Do we want an actor or a talent or a VO that's kind of a household name, or do we want a rising star? Do we want several voices so it's regional? Do we want someone in one element of the campaign but not another element? So it so varies, and I think that's the hard part of buying art. Every single person that walks into that gallery is looking at something different. A friend of mine opened a restaurant and told me that the hardest part about the restaurant is that everybody sits down and has a different item that they're looking at to judge the restaurant. Is the napkin folded? Is the fork clean? Is there something on the glass? Was the restroom okay? Was the waiter polite? And he would tell me that it's very hard to know. So that's why people in the restaurant industry are constantly making sure everything's perfect, because it's hard for you to understand the trigger of the guest. And I think when you look at talent buyers, or people that are looking and seeking for voices or any art, but in particular, this voiceover conversation, we also must be aware of all those elements. And I think that if you're in a voiceover career and you're kind of in that beginning stage, so your plane's about to take off, you're not above the clouds coasting, working with people like Celia is so important, because you have a life coach, you have a weight trainer, you have all these different people that help you in life. The same thing goes for this part of the career. And then once you're above the clouds, that's a whole nother level of maintenance that you need to do, where there's different challenges and different opportunities. So I just think that when you look at this segment overall, now that the barrier of entry has been lowered, the competition is strong, and you have to at least stand up enough above the crowd so people can see you and, more importantly, hear what you have to offer.
Right. So Celia, then when you're speaking with a voice talent and coming up with a brand, you're considering all this stuff. This is stuff that's running through your brain. You're not only thinking about it from, what makes sense in terms of the talent's personality and their branding, but how that comes across to an ad executive and then the ultimate client. It's a lot of things to juggle.
Absolutely. And I just think, that's why I love my job so much, is because I love working with actors, and I've done it my whole career. And I found that this is the piece that I know how hard talent work, And I just really believe that if you get this piece right, with this, really savvy group of people we're selling to, then everything else gets easier. So I always tell my clients, if we get this piece right, well, then when you're sleeping or you're out at a party, your brand is out there working for you. It's making you look good. Of course, you have to be able to back that up, but it is an amazing way to rise above the crowd. So, Doug, I love all of your analogies about buying art.
Yeah.
Because I do think, each individual is so special, and it's about moving somebody, through visually how you're presenting yourself, how you sound. And this is just a really amazing way to do it. It's just like you're layering on reasons for people to say yes and to choose you.
Yeah, and the thing is that most people don't work in the creative industries for their life, for their career. So they look at things linear. Is there a procurement department? Is there a centralized resource? But in the creative space, everything is judged and is subjective. And I think that makes the artist's job very hard, but it also goes back to the authenticity. You have to be who you are, and you have to be confident. You have to be secure. You have to be committed. And then you also have to ask yourself, are you going to be market driven? So are you going to look reactively to what the market is hiring? If there are hundreds and hundreds of jobs to read local audio car dealership ads, the market is driving that. Is that something that you want to be the best at because there's always going to be opportunities? Or do you want to be creatively different and have companies come to you because you offer a unique opportunity? So those are two different runways of success. One is filling a need, and one is building a need. And I think that when you are an independent contractor or sole proprietor or business or entity, those are very important decisions at the beginning of your career. Do you want to fill demand, or do you want to build demand, then fill demand? Because it's a two-step process where many times companies can get caught up, even on the highest level. You would say Yahoo built search engines and then filled the need, but then Google waited for them to build the whole infrastructure, and then they came in second. Yeah. You could say Blimpie Sub built demand for Subway sandwiches over hamburgers, and then you could say that Subway came in and filled the need better than they did. So I think there is a risk and a reward for building demand and then filling it, where there's a kind of straight path if you just feed what the market is giving you.
That's great. And I like those two different directions because I can recognize that in the voiceover industry very much. Some people are very good at fulfilling a very specific trend that happens at any one time, and then other people are quite niche. So going off of that, actually, Doug, I want to ask you a question real quick. How many times do you write a spec for a voiceover that you want, and then you find it in the auditions that you get sent and go, right, that person perfectly personifies that, versus you write a spec and you predict what you're going to get, and then someone comes in completely out of left field and you'll see or hear something and go, wow, I never thought of that. That's just a really interesting perspective on it. And you go with that option.
Well, me personally, I don't listen to the specs, but what I can tell you is this would vary by clients. So sometimes clients say, let's try something we haven't seen or haven't heard. We're the disruption company. So we try to bring difference and alternative to the table in a way that is builds the vision for a brand, and it defies convention, and it's something that's very disruptive and sticky. But it all depends, because some clients would like to go in that direction, and I think they fall under the same metric we just spoke of. And then some just want to kind of go with a good, safe voice and talent. They don't want this to be a political message. They don't want this to go viral. They just want to know their audience, target it specifically, and go on to the next piece of media art. And then some clients go, you know what? I'm looking at the fringes. I'm looking at the trends. I'm looking at the strategy. And I'm saying to myself, let's do something that's wow. So even in that element, because we are a representative or an ally with our clients, they on their end also have creative teams, producers, CMOs. So the process even goes through us one more level up.
Right. That makes sense. Yeah. So Celia, this may seem like a really stupid question, and it may well be a stupid question.
No such thing.
Okay, well, we'll see. Does your branding have to match the sound of your voice? So if you have a really deep, manly voice, for example, if you just wanted to go a light, bright, fluffy route, is that ridiculous? Or would that be a funny, sort of interesting juxtaposition? Or does it really have to match in that way?
No, that's a great question. I mean, it's all so custom, so it just depends. Like on the face of that question, I would say yes. When your brand, what you're saying about yourself, and visually what your collateral material looks like, when it matches your voice, you're like, oh, yes, it builds trust. Yeah. Like I've had situations in the past where I listen to stuff all the time and people send me stuff, and somebody sent a website and it was of this like teeny bopper, this photo. And then I listened to her voice and she, definitely was not a teeny bopper.
Right.
And I was so disappointed. Like I was like, ooh, that's not serving you well. That's not good branding.
Yeah.
And then, other times a guy with a deep voice, yet, yes, it needs to match. Can you do something fun and bring humor and edge to it where you're somehow, making a joke? Absolutely. Right. But all in all, I would say the job of your brand is to look the same as you sound.
Yeah, because you don't necessarily want to feel like you're tricking anyone. You don't want to have someone go to your website and bring you into your website thinking it's one thing, and then the sound comes out. It's like, whoa.
Like, hey, 20-year-old guys are really popular, so I'm going to brand myself to my demo, and then you're a baby boomer. That's not going to bode well for anybody's desire in checking you out.
Right. Yeah. Have you had that experience, Doug?
I think that as the more and more we have this conversation, I feel that it's inspirational because no matter what voice you have, you can build it and create a unique opportunity for it.
Right.
But on the other hand, though, everyone has a voice, but not everybody has a vote. And I think that's where we have to look at this. Everyone has a voice, but not everybody has a vote. So you have to know who you're speaking to or who's listening to your material that can help vote and get you to the next level and get you to the next step, because it is so subjective. It is so decentralized. It's really hard to have. I mean, you have people walking down the street that someone could stop them and say, oh my gosh, your voice is amazing.
Yeah.
And get them into a demo studio and record them. It's almost like finding a musician in a smoky nightclub kind of analogy.
Yeah.
But then you have someone who's put $10,000 into their demo tape. They have the best studio. They never recorded anything on a mobile device, and they can't buy an opportunity.
Yeah.
Right.
So it's just so hard to know.
Well, Celia, you have offered to give a listener of the show a brand audit, and we're going to be recording it and putting it out in a future episode, which is super exciting. We get to sort of be a fly on the wall with that.
Yay.
And we're running a search for our victim. So if you'd like to put your name forward as a guinea pig, be sure to connect with us on social media and like us on Facebook and Twitter, and then send us a message detailing why you would be a good candidate, and I'll pass them over to Celia, and Celia will choose someone. So Celia, what is a brand audit?
So a brand audit is, I have people send me whatever materials that they're using right now to put themselves out there. So your demos, you should think about your brand in the way you have your demos produced and what kind of content is on there. Your website is the best way, and anything you're using to promote yourself. And then we can listen to your demos, do a little interview about who you are authentically and sort of what brand you could think about putting out there. And then we're going to look at what you are putting out there and see if there's a disconnect.
Right.
So yeah, it's a pretty fun little lively exercise. So anybody who's interested in kind of combing through their brand, send it on over.
Yeah, I can't wait to do that. It's going to be so interesting.
Yeah, I think I was going to say another thing that I think would be a good takeaway for the listeners is everybody needs to have 3 people in order to be successful. You need to have a mentor, an advocate, and a coach. So your mentor is a North Star. This is someone who is one level above you, who's doing exactly what you want to do or paving the way for a lane that you want to create. You have to notify and identify who that person is and get on their roadmap and on their radar. The advocate is an insider. This is someone who works in the organization, someone like myself, who Celia could call if she has a client. I could say, well, XYZ, XYZ. I want them to win, and I'm an insider, and I can understand the things that they need to do to at least get to the point where they should be. And then the coach, Muhammad Ali had Bodini Brown, and he would sit in this corner and say, you're the champ. There's nobody better than you. You're the greatest of all time. And every time he would get out of the ring, he would be in his ear. And we need that person too. Yeah, so I think those 3 people need to be on your team and need to be identified and need to be in your corner as you're going along in your career all the way up into the top.
I love it.
So do you still have those people, Doug?
Yes. I have my mentor, I have my advocate, and I have my coach.
That's amazing. Celia?
Yeah, absolutely. Always. Definitely always mentoring with somebody who's further along than I am. Definite advocate, and I definitely work with coaches.
Yeah, because we all need encouragement, and at the same time, everything's constantly changing and swirling, isn't it?
Totally. And I think for the actors, that mindset piece, I just wrote a book about branding, and it's called VOICEOVER Achiever, Brand Your VO Career, Change Your Life.
Right.
And it's really about when you get your brand right, your mindset starts to fall in place. And for voice actors, they sound like what their mindset is leading them towards in an audition or a gig.
Right.
So I think any work that as talent you guys can do to like an athlete, an elite athlete, like getting in that zone with your mindset, you're just going to do better. So all of these things help that. I love Doug's mentor, advocate, coach.
Yeah.
Any kind of mindset work you can do, being authentic and getting your brand right gets you in the right mindset to win the gig. I think that's really important.
Celia, I'd also say one more thing. Social media. How many followers you have and your influence does also show up sometimes for local or digital campaigns.
Right.
People want to know that they are hiring someone who has a voice, who has a following. And I remember a few years ago at the Voice Arts Awards, this conversation came up. We were on a panel, and the conversation was, are talent and booking agents looking at how many followers you have before they commit to you? And there was no hard and fast answer, but the reality was they're checking it. And whether it's used in an overall kind of checklist of, is this person the right one? I tell everybody, your social media is like a benefit of the doubt credit.
Right. 2
people are tied. Both of them could do the job well. Both of them auditioned, and they really are neck and neck. The social media will sometimes push people over. That gives them the benefit of the doubt. So not something that shows up in the beginning, but maybe at the end, it's the one thing that can be a differentiator.
And that's also the content as well, isn't it? I mean, if you post controversial things, that might dissuade someone from hiring you.
Or it might be you being authentic, and pulling in your tribe. So I always have my clients, stay away from the really rough stuff, but don't be afraid to be controversial in your brand or your persona, because if you start trying to please everybody out there, you're just a beige wall as far as branding goes.
Right.
So it really is okay to be expressive.
And it's also realized how many people are out there and that are competitive. Now you have the international market. You have all these huge markets, but also know your market. Because if you speak for the LGBT community, you need to be working with GLAAD, working with the HRC, going to local chapters and events, maximizing all the voices you can for Pride websites. I think part of the time is people aren't even being true to their niche.
Right.
People say that they're part of a group, but, if you are part of the people that have different abilities, or if you're part of the Hispanic community, the Latin American community, Black community, you should at a very minimum be working with organizations that directly target your niche to get that work and to actually give your voice a little bit more amplification. So I think knowing your niche specifically is another opportunity that people should be a little bit more aware of and take a little bit more heed to.
Right.
Absolutely.
That's fantastic. I'm going to get on here because I don't want to keep you guys any longer. I got a couple more questions, and then I have a few questions from the audience. I reached out last night, and we have a few questions here. So my penultimate question is, how often should you change your brand, and why would you?
I see, because I've been doing this for so long, I love it that you just used the word penultimate, by the way.
Oh, really?
That's fantastic. That's a good one that weekend. that should go in your brand somewhere.
The penultimate voice talent on the internet.
Penultimate voice talent. If you can't get Hugh Grant, the penultimate voice talent. This comes up, and I've been doing this long enough that I've got clients. I have one client that I've worked with for the last 29 years. I was her agent in Minneapolis. I was her agent at CESD. Then I've been her manager forever. And we morph her brand every 5 years. So when you think about brands in the marketplace, the more well-known you become and the bigger your career grows, you need to tweak your brand to reflect that.
Right.
Look at having to change it up at least every 5 years, just a little switch. Sometimes it's more like every 3 years.
Yeah. And you have to keep it fresh, because we're also people, not products, and the reality of the situation is it's hard to, look at someone and say, hey, you just need to refresh, you need to rebrand, so it goes back to the very personal elements of it. So it's just important that you stay fresh and stay relevant and stay, hip to the details. I mean, just look at the creative industries, what font you use, what color is your website? Is an infinite scroll versus left to right? Is it mobile? There's a lot of small things that just come up over and over again. One tip I say to people is that they should absolutely go to a private browser on their phone or their desktop, one that doesn't have any cookies or history, and Google themselves and see what comes up. Do you need to add a middle initial? Do you need to put a junior? Do you have, there's a website called howmanyofme.com, and you can go in there and type in your first and last name, and it pulls up all the people in the United States with your name. You should at least know how many of you there are. There's 13 Doug Melvilles, but it's good. It's good for me to know that. But again, it's all of these little details matter to keep your brand fresh and relevant, and keep your voice something that's still has a place in the market.
Right. As a side note, the only other Jamie Muffet that I know in this country runs strip clubs, which is slightly annoying. So luckily I don't get to...
To that point, though, there's a website called brandyourself.com. And it was started by a group of entrepreneurs out of Syracuse University, based on a similar story. Someone had their name and kept getting a lot of DUIs. So what it is that you go and pay a fee, and it moves all the links that are disparaging to the last page of the Google search instead of the first page.
Ooh.
So, there are a lot of things out there if you just kind of look around and take a minute to see. But there are a lot of ways to kind of ensure that you're shown in the best light, at least digitally, because things online do last forever.
Can you do that for your competitors?
That's a good question. That's a good question. That's a good question.
So my final question, before I get to audience questions, is, are there any marketing no-nos that you regularly see that make you cringe?
I just think people... I just would say my overall marketing is I'm good at everything.
Right.
People don't know how to tell their own story. I see it all the time. It's religiously unbelievable. It's of the world of, you are spending your whole life doing something, and then someone asks you to tell your story, and you can't even correctly enunciate it or tell or share your story.
Right.
So I think that's a huge problem, is people can't tell their own story or don't know how to succinctly do it. They don't know what they're great at. They just know that they're good at many things, but there's a difference between good versus great.
Right.
There's a lot of people that are good, but only a few that are great. So I think those things kind of show up to me as not being able to tell your story and not knowing what you're great at would be my two no-nos.
Right.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I would say when you hit the ground and are marketing really hard with a really crappy brand, that always makes me cringe.
Right.
So if your website looks like it was built in 1993 or is like totally not appealing, but you're like marketing it, I'm always like, oh, don't do that. And then the other one is, marketing is all of these things, and social media, and what you're sending out, and what your brand looks like, and how you're getting that brand in front of people. And to just be really aware, it's all like a big party, so think about the social cues of how you would behave at a party, and don't just shove it down people's throats. Like, it's a give and take, so you have to have sort of a sixth sense about how much is enough and what is too much. And I will say to the acting community, you guys almost always quit too soon. You're so worried about bugging somebody or being too much in somebody's face, where you're like, oops, I sent out a thing and nobody got back to me, so I guess I'm done.
I thought you were going to say the opposite about actors, that they were too in your face.
I mean, some are, but it's just a handful. Yeah. I think most people get too polite about it. And, there is that old adage of, it used to be, people need like 6 touches before they buy. Right. Now it's like a lot more than that, because our attention span is so short. So you can show up a bunch of times. Like, don't give up on yourself. Okay. As long as you know that your talent is great and your brand is great, you're solving a problem for somebody when they find you being the right voice.
Okay, great. Okay, so let's get a couple of audience questions in now. So Zach Alleman asks, as someone who is new but nonetheless motivated to make this my career, how soon should my initial marketing push begin? When should I create a website, for example?
Immediately. And, people ask me all the time, one step beyond that is, when should I do my brand? And whatever you put out there, that is your brand. So I say, take control of it right away, do the work, figure out who you are. And you should have a website right away, as soon as you have a great demo to put on it, because you only have one chance to make a good first impression.
Right.
what I think people just need to realize that they're on the second they walk outside their house.
Right.
They're being evaluated, and the show begins as soon as they ring the doorbell. People are looking and observing, and to that caller's advice, I would say realize you don't know what people are looking at. So you just have to realize that if you don't have a website and that's part of your covert operation, that's fine. But if you want to go into the marketplace correctly.
Right.
Yeah.
Just keep everything buttoned up would be my advice.
Right.
Totally. And also, I would say to Zach that, all of this is prefaced by you have to be really competitive, so that training comes first. So you have to know when is the right time to put yourself out there.
Right.
And as soon as you know you're competitive, then you pull the trigger on all of this stuff.
Cool. Okay. So final question, and it's a very quick one. Jason Leach wants to know, and it's sticking to this same subject, what does a potential employer want to see on your website?
I mean, they're there to hear
the work.
Yep. They're there to hear your demos.
Yeah.
So, yeah. All of this other stuff, it's just you trying to woo them.
As a voiceover actor, does it matter what you look like? Do they even need to see a picture? Is that crucial?
In our world, I would say, from my standpoint, no. But that it would probably be a little bit different for Celia. But from my standpoint, no.
Okay.
Yeah, we used to say no. It's irrelevant, but now the secret is out.
Right.
We all look at each other all the time. So I always tell my clients, if your look is on brand to the way you sound, use it. If your look is fills a trend, if there's a trend in voiceover where they're, it's all about the 20-year-old guy. If you're a 20-year-old guy, put your picture on there.
Yeah.
So it just depends. So I would say about half the time I have clients use their photo.
Right. And the reason not to might be you may have a 20-year-old sounding voice, but if you're in your mid-40s, that might clash. Or
yeah. I mean, that's part of the beauty of this career is it's not about what you look like.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, I think that pretty much covers everything. So unless you guys have any final thoughts, we can wrap it up.
My final thought is believe in yourself, because if you don't do it, no one else will. And onward and upward.
Awesome.
Yep. And remember to have fun being an artist, so the more fun you have, the better you're going to sound.
Brilliant. Well, Celia Siegel, Doug Melville, thank you so much for coming on. That was a really, really fascinating interview. And just thank you.
Oh, all right. Thank you for having us.
A lot of fun.
All right. Thank you.
Take care. We'll see everybody on the brand audit.
Okay, so I had a huge intro, so I'm going to back off, especially as I read something the other day. Someone was moaning about how long intros are on podcasts, so it kind of made me want to do an extra long one just to annoy them. But I'm going to keep the outro short, mercifully. So thank you, Celia and Doug. That was an amazing interview. That's certainly going to change my approach to my marketing and branding, and I think that should do for you too. And it was interesting that really there's no sort of point at which it's too early to begin this journey. As I mentioned in the episode, Celia has very kindly offered to do a brand audit to one of our listeners, and to be considered for that, you have to be a follower on Facebook and Twitter, and you can send me a message through either of those explaining why you would be a good candidate for this. So maybe you have an interesting story as to why you've entered the voiceover industry. You have something unique that you want to explore. I'm not sure how Celia is going to choose the person, but you have to be willing to do this in a recorded fashion because we're going to put it out as an episode, or at least part of an episode. So definitely get your submissions in for that. And this week is Thanksgiving, so if you're listening to this around the Thanksgiving holiday, happy Thanksgiving. And next week is the long-awaited business episode. I think that should be a pretty good one. Got two really, really excellent people for that. So I'm supposed to be keeping this brief, so I'll speak to you next time. Bye. Many thanks to this week's guests Doug Melville and Celia Siegel. Thank you also to J. Michael Collins and Backstage Magazine. Join us next time for another class.